Good afternoon. I'm Cheryl Hooker, a senator from Rutland County, and it's my privilege to welcome all of you to the rededication of the Rutland District and Family Courthouse. This process began about a year ago when Judge Jean Colludi and former Senator Peg Flory approached the Rutland legislative delegation about the prospect of renaming the courthouse in honor of Judge Frank McCaffrey. Senator Brian Collmore introduced the bill in the Senate, where it was voted on unanimously. And after wending its way through the legislative process, it passed by the end of the session, which I have to say was a record in legislative action. And the fact that we are here today, completing the project, is a tribute to the efforts of the staff at the state's Department of Buildings and General Services, especially Commissioner Chris Cole and Eric Philcorn, and the crews at Jancola Construction and Green Screen Graphics, and all of those who have worked to bring this day to fruition. So we're celebrating that success, but more importantly, we're paying tribute to the legacy of a man who made a significant impact not only on the realization of this building, but in the lives of many who came to it. We began this celebration with a blessing by the brothers from Weston Priory. Psalm number 1, Frank's favorite. Frank and Rita McCaffrey met the brothers shortly after moving to Rutland in 1969. For half a century, their friendship has grown and flourished, making the brothers as much family as friends. Brother Richard?
Sincere in their love of God. Oh happy are the just ones who are sincere in their love of God. Happy indeed are those who follow not the counsel of the wicked, but whose delight is the law of God, and whose ponder that law day and night. Oh happy are the just ones who are sincere in their love of God. They are like a tree that is planted beside the flowing waters, that yields its fruit in due season, and whose leaves shall never fade. Oh happy are the just ones who are sincere in their love of God. Oh happy are the just ones who are sincere in their love of God.
Thank you, brothers. I I won't go on about Frank McCaffrey because I know that each of our speakers today will talk about the qualities that made him the force that he was in the judiciary and the community. However, I do want to comment on something that struck me while listening to what President Obama said at the funeral of Congressman Elijah Cummings. He said, quote, "I was just noticing the Honorable Elijah E. Cummings, and this is a title that we confer on all kinds of people who get elected to public office. We're supposed to introduce them as honorable, but Elijah Cummings was honorable before he was elected to office. There's a difference. There's a difference if you were honorable and treated others honorably outside the limelight." Unquote. The same can be said of the Honorable Frank McCaffrey, that he was honorable long before he was appointed to the bench. Our first tribute comes via a letter from our senior U.S. Senator Patrick Leahy, thanks to the gracious delivery of his staffer, Diane Derby. Dear Rita, Marcel and I were delighted to learn that the district courthouse in Rutland would be rededicated to the memory of Judge Francis McCaffrey. Rita, I can think of no one better than Frank to be honored in this fashion, as he had such a tremendous impact on the judiciary, not only in Rutland, but throughout the state of Vermont. The two of you were a wonderful team for justice, and I know that this dedication will be a source of pride, not only for you, but also for your children and grandchildren. On this important occasion, please know that we are proud of the entire McCaffrey family. Frank's many contributions to Vermont will be long remembered. Sincerely, Patrick. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Cortland Cursones. Judge Cursones is a proud lifelong resident of Rutland County. He was appointed to the bench in 2009 and is currently the presiding judge of the Rutland unit. He's also Judge McCaffrey's successor as the presiding judge in the Rutland Treatment Court. Your Honor.
Thank you, Senator Hooker. Let's see if I get this over. Dear family, friends, and colleagues of Judge McCaffrey, it is truly an honor to be speaking to you today. As mentioned, I'm currently the presiding judge in Rutland County, and the Rutland Adult Drug Court is part of my jurisdiction. However, before becoming a judge, I was a practicing attorney in Rutland City for 25 years. I started practicing in 1981, and Judge McCaffrey was appointed to the bench in 1980, meaning he was a brand new judge when I started practicing in front of him. Although I was regularly before him, I had no idea that he was a newly appointed judge. From day one, Judge McCaffrey was everything I had always hoped a judge would be. He was compassionate, understanding, empathetic, and most of all, fair. It did not matter who you were, a private attorney, public defender, prosecutor, defendant, or other litigant. He treated everyone with the utmost respect and dignity. It did not matter what walk of life you came from. To me, this is why it's so special to have this building named after him. Not only was he a Rutland County judge for some 38 years, but more importantly, Judge McCaffrey embodies what a judge should be, and he became an integral part of the Rutland community. Now, whenever any of us walk through these doors, the words above us will remind us what our expectations are when we enter this building. There will never be another Judge McCaffrey, but these words will remind all of us what we should strive to be and that we should always be seeking justice for all. Judge McCaffrey, after he retired, volunteered his time for well over 10 years serving as the Rutland Adult Treatment Court judge. It was there in this building where he had such a long-lasting effect on the persons that appeared in front of him, people who were struggling mightily with their addictions but were seeking a better life. It is here where Judge McCaffrey had such a profound effect on our community. Kylie Dixon is the longtime treatment court coordinator who worked closely with Judge McCaffrey for those years. He's in Virginia and couldn't be here today, but I asked him if he had any thoughts he wanted me to convey, and this is what he said. Judge McCaffrey frequently stated outside the courtroom just after a hearing, "You know, we have so much more to learn from the participants than they do from us." He understood that each court session was a learning opportunity for him, an opportunity to better understand human suffering and perseverance. It was a testament to his empathetic nature. He always believed that treatment court had a 100% success rate. He defined success as every participant having the opportunity to see what a drug-free life looks like. He said, if we can show them that, then we're making a difference. He never gave up on the participants, even when they relapsed and suffered setbacks, which of course they did. He understood that we were also fallible and that the program was fallible. We weren't right all the time, but we could always try, always strive to help the person in front of us to make better decisions and a better life for himself or herself. Whenever times were tough and it felt like we weren't making progress, his refrain was, "We just have to keep trying." Those were Kylie's thoughts. And when I was assigned to Rutland, I was fortunate enough to have an office just 2 doors down the hallway from him, and I got to talk to Judge McCaffrey every Tuesday when he was here. And I'd often be struggling with a tough case, and I'd go down and talk to him, and he always had words of wisdom for me. Usually he'd talk about a case he had and help me understand what I should do. Other times he'd be a little more cryptic, and he'd say something that he said, well, I think if you're a baseball pitcher, sometimes you just have to face the batter head on. And I'd scratch my head a little bit trying to figure it out, but then I knew what he was saying. He's saying, there's no one right answer, Court. Just go out there and give them the best decision you can, but do it now and do it face to face. Last brief story. My father, who's a lawyer, now 90 years old here in Rutland, in the late 80s, he and I went to Montpelier to testify for another judge, Judge Mahady, who was up for Supreme Court. And we both testified, and it was the same committee Judge McCaffrey was in front of at the same time for retention. And when my father was done speaking about Judge Mahady, one of the senators said, Ted, do you have anything you want to say about Judge McCaffrey? Without missing a beat, my father said, when it comes to Judge McCaffrey, don't count your ballots, count your blessings. And that's the way we all feel about Judge McCaffrey. We're counting our blessings that we knew him. You knew him as Mac. I knew him as Judge McCaffrey. Now for generations, people will know him through this wonderful building. Thank you, everyone. And it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is a recent graduate from the Rutland Drug Treatment Program, Mr. John Gaborio.
Hello, everybody. Geez, I'm as nervous today as was the first day I walked in drug court. I don't know, Judge McCaffrey changed my life. When I first went into drug court, I had so much anxiety and so scared to walk in that building, because the only time I had ever been to court in my life was because I had been in trouble, you know? So I'd walk in there every week thinking I was in trouble and scared to death, you know? And then halfway through that program, one of my caseworkers, Sarah Walker, told me, you know, the judge does this voluntarily. And that changed my life because, you know, I had always looked at it like, what kind of people want to help someone like me who was a drug addict for 37 years and didn't know how to do any right, just knew wrong. And he was helping me. He wasn't there to hurt me, he was there to help me. And he helped me get through that program, just like Judge Courthouse over here. And I owe my honor to those people, and I'm trying my hardest to change my life. And my life has changed a lot since the guy that walked in there before, you know? I mean, I pay my rent, I live in society, I hold a job. I've changed everything I could about my life, and I owe it all to Judge McCaffrey and to Judge Courthouse, because they're the ones that gave me the chance to get through this. And, you know, we're willing to give me a chance. You know, thank you, you guys. I don't...
Thank you, Judge Courthouse, and thank you, John, for letting us know that the program works.
As long as you want it, it will work for you.
All right. Peg Flory is a lifelong Rutland County resident. After clerking for the law, she practiced in Rutland. She also helped craft many laws during her nearly 2 decades as a member of the House of Representatives and the State Senate. Senator?
Thank you. I got to know Judge McCaffrey long before he was Judge McCaffrey. It's back in the early 70s. My dad was the janitor at Immaculate Heart of Mary up here. And back in those days when someone needed help, a meal, a place to stay, they went to their local churches. And invariably, the church would call my father at home and say, can you find someone that will help this person? Early 70s, an angel appeared to Rutland County called Frank McCaffrey. He was the man that if my dad needed someone, he could call McCaffrey. And Frank would find someone, invariably. That's how I got to know him. I got to know him a little bit on a different area quite a few years later. I was, by then, an attorney, and they were discussing building this building. Frank was a sweetheart, but he had a steel mind, and oh, he was sly. In the legislature, there was a little bit of a battle going between the House and the Senate. This building was too expensive, according to the Senate. The House institutions was led by a friend of mine, Bob Wood. He was pushing for it. Couldn't quite get that money to work out. Enter Judge McCaffrey. At that time, the building was supposed to be 5 stories. McCaffrey came. See, even they appreciate him. McCaffrey went to Representative Wood and said, I got a thought. Why don't you chop off the top 2 stories? Build 3, but make sure when you're building the foundation, you build it to hold 5 stories just in case. Bill passed. Courthouse got built. My next experience with Judge McCaffrey was a few years later. I was chair of House Judiciary, and we were desperately trying to do something to deal with the drug crisis and the overcrowding in the prisons. And Judge McCaffrey called me, and he said, I need to talk to you. Something has worked in some areas that I wish you'd consider. I said, what? He said, drug court. I said, what's drug court? We spent an entire session sitting, working out the details of drug court, making it a pilot project in Rutland. Judge McCaffrey was the one that pushed this whole idea through. And boy, he was right. And I thank him every day. And it's just so appropriate that this building that he helped build and the program that he helped design bears his name for eternity. Thank you.
Thank you, Peg. Greg Muriello is an attorney in private practice in Ludlow. After graduating from law school, he clerked for Judge McCaffrey, and they remained great friends thereafter. I think Greg's being a coach had something to do with their lasting friendship. Greg?
Thank you, Rita and Jimmy and Joe and Mary Beth and Tricia for this honor. I think it's Frank's fault it's so effing cold here. So he's trying to induce us, even from where he is, to be short and sweet, which I will. It's hard to talk about Frank or conceptualize about Frank without thinking about Rita in the same breath and spirit. It's impossible, in fact. These words are about Frank today because his name's on the building. But I'm thinking of Rita, too, as a parenthetical to everything that Frank was. I can't imagine him doing it without Rita, and vice versa. The union of those two spirits are like incredible. So Rita, I just want you to know we'll be speaking Frank throughout, but thinking of you. And also, when you're long gone, you know, you're with Frank, Mac, whomever, someday, I'm going to petition government to... All it takes is one insertion point and four letters. How much can that cost? Peg, can you help us there? Anyway, so I met Frank as Frank, not judge, not attorney, on basketball courts in Rutland. He'd follow his boys around who were gym rats. His boys would look for any open court or gym, and they'd get in and play, and every once in a while there'd be this kind of older player, shorter player. His set shot was horrible. Granted, he was older, and I'd say his vertical leap, what would you say, Jimmy, 2-3 inches, something like that? All right. And if that had been the only bond in 40 years, that was 40 years ago. He wasn't a judge, I wasn't an attorney, I wasn't even in law school. That would have been a bond for life. If you bonded with Frank in hoops, that was a bond for life. And I even got Rita's permission to wear mine. Jimmy has his. I even got my wife's permission, which was really surprising, to walk out the door with these bad boys on and not get a spousal injunction of some sort. But the reason I'm here is, I think, I got to know Frank in many paths and contexts over life. in law, in courts, in community, in Weston with our dear brothers. And I've been a real beneficiary of seeing how someone can lead a life. It's possible to lead a life. It's a life of action. It's not just words. And so I came to witness it and benefit it. And what I was witnessing was seeing people benefit in every nook and cranny of life. The drug court, of course, is the most noted one, but all over. Frank walked, talked, lived, acted his spirit, his love, his faith, his optimism in others, and he pulled it out. He called it. And so I feel like I'm really blessed to have had a friend like that. Not sure I've had a friend like that. And so that's really the spirit of it. I will say that this flyer, I really like this flyer because I thought when I saw this picture again of Frank, it's a mind-blowing picture from the day I first saw it. It speaks so many things. And I actually thought, Rita, you could have just posted this here, dispensed with all of us, and we could have reflected on it for 30 minutes. Apart from the picture, by the way, it does say that there are dignitaries to speak today. And here I am, I'm speaking. So I intend to keep this around the house to remind family from time to time that they're in the company of a dignitary. But the real spirit in this picture, and it really is unbelievable. I forget when I first saw it. I know it was on Frank's mass card, but I think it may have come out earlier. Maybe it was in the press. But I look at it, and it's a solo picture of Frank there, giving and getting. And the recipient in this picture may well have been someone like John. And well done, John.
Thank you.
Great to know you. But it's Frank giving, and it's not the end of a trip for him or for that recipient, whomever it is. But we know for fact that this didn't just happen. There had to be somebody who reached out to this recipient and not just encouraged, but looked for the love, looked for the good, and pulled it out of him or her and fostered it and allowed that person to get to this point on his or her path with the potential for success, for a healthy life, for family, for love, for accomplishment, for self-respect. All those things prior to Frank's endeavors were a long shot, and they may still be, but he's given them the chance. So I think of Frank, I really think of him, even though this picture you wouldn't say that's an action figure, but I really do think of him in that way. We aspire to do things, we know good people and they think good things. Frank's every day was action towards this positive end for his world. And that's what I take away from Frank. In this building, I'm going to make it a point, hopefully, to drive by from time to time for the rush of good memories, but also because I think when I think about Frank and Rita, I think, and when I think deeply about it, I think, how can I be better? How can I act to do better for others? And that's his and your legacy. God bless you, Frank. God bless you, Rita.
Attorney Moriello failed to tell you why he had the sneakers. It's because Frank always used to say, you never know when a game's going to break out, right, Joe? Judge Walter Morris worked in private practice before working as Vermont's Defender General, and then was appointed to the Supreme Court bench, where he worked with Judge McCaffrey. Your Honor.
I want to be quick to say that's Superior Court bench, not Supreme Court bench. Yes, I work with Frank, one of his trial judges. It's hard to take from John's talk to you all and say any more. I'm thinking back there. I couldn't do it. I couldn't say any more than John has said, but I'll try. I've got 4 wonderful sisters who I love dearly, but never had a brother. And so over time, I got Frank to oblige me by allowing me to call him the brother I never had. And then we had a fabulous dance together even one night up at Bread Loaf that some here will remember. I just loved the man, and our trial bench really loved and respected him, and that was a product of what he gave to us. Now today's the day after Halloween, right? All Hallows Eve. So that means today is what? All Saints Day, right? You passed your catechism class. So every All Saints, I usually come around to remembering an old saying that's attributed to Oscar Wilde, believe it or not. Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. And that for me just sums up so beautifully, the concept, the virtue of mercy that was at the heart of everything that Frank did and everything he gave to us. Mercy. And when you think about that word, we think of things like sympathy or compassion. But as I think of that, I give it a little bit of a broader meaning, and it's so exemplified by everything that Frank did and showed to us, which is being a genuine presence of love and compassion and healing in everything he did. Whether that was in a very commonplace thing or a thing of crisis, an ordinary day. How are you doing? What are you doing up there in Newport today? Or, gee, I have to tell you something and pass this on for your own good. Or even bigger to the point that John has just made so beautifully for us of touching souls and people and changing lives. That's the real deal. So mercy in action, that was Frank. We know that. That's what brings us here. We were touched by his version of exercise of mercy. As judges, you're saying, wait a minute, a judge, how can a judge be merciful? That's not in the playbook. We don't take an oath, I shall solemnly swear to be merciful in everything I do. We swear to uphold the constitutions and laws of our state and federal government, and we swear to provide equal justice under law to everyone. But where's the mercy come in there? Sometimes we actually are seen by folks as anything but merciful, right? Often, I'd say. Makes you want to look around when you're in the grocery store and all, but seriously, in sentencing, we're called on to consider things like just punishment, deterrence, which can be a harsh thing, incapacitation even in the rare case for the benefit and safety of society. We are enjoined to do rehabilitation, but that's a hard thing for many of us to grasp. And some judges are absolutely afraid, or at least hesitant, to put it politely, to engage in merciful behavior on the bench. That wasn't Frank. In fact, he knew what we were taking an oath to do, and he lived it, and lived it well. He knew to uphold the Constitution and laws of our state and federal government and apply equal justice. But he was not afraid to see every person who would come in front of him as another human, as somebody who was entitled to certain rights and fair treatment, but who had a need that could be reached by a certain judge who wasn't afraid to go beyond, here's the formulary of your rights, to then say, what's going on with you today, and how can I reach you in a fully appropriate and loving way with mercy? That was Frank. We loved him as trial judges. And he always knew, without us even saying, if something was going on. It's kind of like your parents in the old days. But out of the blue, you'd get a call. And this isn't just me, but we share this experience from Frank. What's happening up there? Well, nothing, as far as I know. Well, I heard this, or what's going on? Can I help you out with this? So he had a unique talent of reading you and your emotions and your state at that time, and again, reaching out to your need, not just what had to be or needed to be done. And I do want to share one thing about Frank in particular. In 1990, many of us here will remember that the family court was launched. Right, Peg? You're over there? The family court was launched, and it was a transitional time in our judiciary, and there were many challenges with it. And Frank gave his heart and soul to that effort of seeing the family court was launched appropriately as a need for our families and children. And he did more than that. That was also a time when we were seeing a sea change in our judiciary and its gender composition. And we had many more female colleagues come on. And guess what? It'll come as no surprise. Our female colleagues, brilliant and talented women, were running into obstacles and challenges in terms of their acceptance as being jurists and their performance of their service as equal colleagues, not equal colleagues, but in the legal profession and among the public. Frank was adamant and ironclad in his support for our female colleagues in that era. Again, reaching out beyond what was necessary to the need. And we all know we have a ways to go yet with regard to gender parity in our judiciary and other professions. But Frank was there. Anybody shout that one out for him? No, I don't think so. It wouldn't have mattered. He was there. He knew that was the right thing. The need beyond the duty or obligation. And so it's a great honor to be here today as well. The brother that I never had, thank you, Frank. And Rita, thanks for sharing a guy to be a brother of a guy who never had a brother. The name above here, when we're all gone, is going to serve as a reminder of all that's been said so far of a person we already know. The things that he did, the things that he said, but more importantly, the things that he showed us through the way in which he loved us and went beyond what was needed to reach us. So I thank you. God bless you all. God bless Frank. We'll see you sometime. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Morris. Justice Paul Reiber was appointed to the Vermont Supreme Court in 2003 and has served as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court since 2004. He has special memories of Judge McCaffrey. Justice Reiber?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you very much. My nose is running. My hands are cold, but my heart is warm. Cheryl, there's a few basketball metaphors here this afternoon. I feel a little like I'm in an obstructed seat at the old garden. I swear. Some of you may remember. You know what I'm talking about, huh? The only trouble is there's no screen. I couldn't see Walter. I couldn't see Peg. Listen, I timed this 7 minutes. I know it's cold. It's supposed to be 7 minutes. Stick with me. So good afternoon. There's a lot of time. There's not a lot of time, but I have a few things I want to say. We're all different here, but we do share a common desire, and that is to see justice done. Through his life and work in the courts, Frank McCaffrey modeled that sense of balance that justice brings to our communities with humor, humility, and humanity. In particular, he was the face of the drug court here in Rutland County. Even after he retired, he continued in that work, and for no pay. He refused to take it. The photograph that we will unveil soon depicts him reaching across and over the bench to shake the hand of a drug court graduate. In some ways, that photograph is a metaphor for all that we hope for. This week I thought a lot about Frank as I traveled to Jackson, Mississippi, of all places, to attend a national conference of young black students sponsored and attended by many of the surviving and iconic civil rights legends as well. 87-year-old Ambassador Andy Young, MLK Jr.'s granddaughter, Lynn Jackson, Bernard Lafayette, who was one of the Freedom Riders in Alabama, and Terry Roberts, who was one of the Little Rock Nine. They were there with the high school students. The Little Rock Nine, incidentally, were the high school students who were prevented from entering school by Governor Orville Faubus in the 60s. I became involved in this project through a friend of mine, Judge Jimmy Edwards from St. Louis, who won the Rehnquist Award a few years ago when I first met him, and who came here in January with his wife and spoke at the law school on MLK Day. And I learned many things on this trip this week. One, I learned from Bernard Lafayette, who holds, by the way, an honorary degree from St. Michael's College. Where's Mike Ryan? St. Michael's College, Mike. He told me about one of the priests from St. Mike's, Father Morris Willett. Father Willett was from New England, but back in the 60s was assigned a parish in Selma, Alabama, when the leaders in the black community were pushing for voting rights for those people. Today, Father Willett is remembered as the first white person to stand up publicly for voting rights reform. The reaction back then was so strong that the priest had to be reassigned. And much of what was said this week about hope through adversity and courage and justice reminded me of Frank's commitment to these same ideals through the work he did in the drug court here in Rutland, work to better our community and for the people facing penalty in the criminal docket who use drugs. Last month, I asked Clerk of Courts Lori Candy, our wonderful Clerk of Courts who's sitting over there on my right, if she could find some of the tapes of Judge McCaffrey's comments to graduates of the drug court. You all may not know how our drug court works, but these are public hearings. And by the way, you are welcome to attend and learn more. At graduation, the judge holds court for the graduates, and with all those others in the program looking on, the judge makes comments to encourage the graduates and to help educate the others who are looking on that they are not alone with the problems that they face. So Lori did this, and I want to take a moment to read some of my effort to transcribe Frank's comments to you. Here's one. He reflected on the 14 years of the program. He said, "The drug court is a program of hope. You will hear of the toll it takes on individuals and families. For those involved, participation is a statement of hope. Hope to overcome it. Hope for their family. Our hope is that through the process, the people who are in it will get a handle on their addiction and any mental health issues. It's not infrequent that there are mental health issues with addiction. People who use opiates," he said, "and any addictive things very quickly do not want to do it. But the issue becomes, how do you get out of it? The way we approach it is with a team that helps the person involved in the issues that brought them here to criminal court." And he also spoke about the history of the program and how to measure success. This is what Frank said. The question is then, are we successful? We think so. We've graduated over 150 people in 14 years. Some have not graduated, and some say, then what is your success rate? At that point, it becomes a bit subjective. For me, I think it's 100%, because for those who graduate, that is a success. And for those who don't, I think we should see that having been here for one day or 1 month, that once you learn how to control the addiction, then your use does not become as comfortable as it once was. Once you know how to manage it, then you are accountable to yourself and to your family. And finally, this is the last passage I want to read. Finally, he talked about our human condition, our common human condition. He said, addiction is a chronic disease. If you have a chronic disease, cure is not an option. And perhaps that is the hard part. Many of us, he said, have a chronic disease, cancer, anxiety, depression, and addiction. The fact that it can't be cured does not mean it cannot be managed, and of course, that's the hard part. So let me close. Our justice system in Vermont is an institution of strength that brings stability to communities, to all the towns and cities across our state. Good and noble people work every day to deliver the promise of our Constitution. Today, I am very grateful for the opportunity to remember this great man, this great judge, Francis McCaffrey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor. T.J. Donovan is a proud native Vermonter and the 26th Attorney General of the state of Vermont. He has known the McCaffreys inside and outside of the judiciary. General?
Thank you, Senator Hooker. I am so happy to be here today. I want to thank Rita McCaffrey and my friend Terry Corzones for the invitation to be here today. I want to acknowledge the great work of the Rutland County delegation, the state legislature, and all members of the state legislature for passing this bill, and Governor Scott for signing it. This is a great day. It is a well-deserved honor for Frank McCaffrey, and I'm so happy to be here. I loved Frank McCaffrey. I did not know him as a judge. I never appeared in front of him. I knew him as a person. I first met Frank and Rita when I became a board member at the Dismiss House. And I loved talking with Frank. He reminded me of my father. We would talk all things sport, politics, and the law. And whether it was at a board meeting, the annual dinner, or phone-a-thons, Frank always would take time to talk with me, and often I would ask for his advice. He would always give me great advice, and it was always with a bit of humor, and Judge Corzones, always with a sports analogy. And he would often close that dispensing of advice with looking me in the eye, cocking his wrist, and telling me to keep shooting. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But in thinking about Frank and what I would say today, I remember the McCaffrey license plate, Pax, Latin for peace. And it is fitting that this courthouse is named after a man who sought to bring peace to so many in this community. Peace for those that suffered, whether they were victims of crime, those that struggled with addiction, those that suffered from mental illness, poverty, or those that were incarcerated. Frank knew, as Yeats would write, that peace comes dropping slowly for so many of us, and for so many that enter this courthouse. He knew that pain, suffering, stigma, and trauma, while it can never be fully healed in this building, could be lessened by his grace. Grace that was born of his mercy and humility that allowed so many not to see an opposing finger that sat above them in court, but sat with them as a fellow human being who simply cared. He knew and lived that it was our shared humanity where all our community members mattered, and that a safe, peaceful, and just society is created and maintained for all of us. It's what Frank McCaffrey dedicated his life to, It's why this building is so aptly named for him today. And let his memory of peace and reconciliation guide us all. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. Our next speaker needs no introduction, but I'll introduce her anyway. She's called Vermont her home since attending Trinity College in 1958, where she met her husband, Matt. They had 60 full, loving, and fruitful years together. Rita worked as coordinator of the Thresholds Prison Volunteer Program for over 12 years before founding the first Dismas House in Vermont in 1986, and then 2 others. Since then, over 1,600 men and women have lived at Dismas House in Vermont. Rita has given selflessly to the Vermont community for decades, hand in hand with her beloved Mac. Rita?
This is the moment you've all been waiting for. It's almost over. Family and friends, what a happy day. I can just imagine Mac saying to me, "Rita, this is big." The McCaffrey family is filled with awe and gratitude for the great honor the Vermont State Legislature has bestowed on my late husband, Francis B. McCaffrey. Mac, as we called him, loved all of you and your common work at the courthouse. Is it okay? Can you hear me? This way? No? Mac, as we called him, loved all of you and your common work at the courthouse, whether in district court, family court, drug treatment court, or as administrative judge for the state of Vermont. He looked forward to his work being in community with you. Our family. What the family and I treasure the most was Mac's presence and love of family. Playing ball on the side lawn, daily basketball on the driveways, helping with homework, his Irish sense of humor that no one could quite figure out, and always loving me, their mother. I made it. To our friends, we thank you for the years of encouragement and friendship. There are no words. We thank Terry Corsones, Executive Director of the Vermont Bar Association, who coordinated between Montpelier and Rutland with the Dedication Committee, who have worked diligently on this wonderful celebration. Terry, where are you? Stand up. We are most grateful to those who initiated the idea of renaming the courthouse, the instigator being Rutland County Side Judge Jean Coludi, who worked so well with Mac in family court, and in planning the new courthouse. The team that championed it from there was the bipartisan Rutland County legislators. How refreshing. Mac had wonderful parents who loved him dearly, no matter what, and I mean that. He received unconditional love and encouragement, which he was then able to give to his family and friends, to those who came before him in court, to his colleagues and the support staff who keep our courts and communities running smoothly. I believe many who came before him felt accepted by him, just as Mac was accepted by his family. He was able to draw the line between the crime that had been committed and the person who was before him. He saw their innate goodness, their dignity and potential to live law-abiding lives, perhaps before they did. But he always, always struggled to be fair. Since Mac's passing, we have received many kind notes. Here are a few comments lawyers remembered Mac saying in court to those before him. There's never a wrong time to do the right thing. Where you go from here is up to you. Mac's communication to new judges: look for the good in those who come before you. A few other quotes by colleagues and friends. Frank was one in a million. He was the epitome of wisdom, compassion, faith, and humor. A former prisoner said to me, I'd pray I'd get Judge McCaffrey when I went to court because he made me feel like a human being, even when being sentenced. He also mentioned being amazed at seeing Mac shooting hoops with residents behind Dismas House. And he really was a good shooter. I just couldn't let that go by. From a Rutland grandmother, I will be forever grateful to Frank for his caring and guidance, which enabled my grandson to pass through drug treatment court and begin a healthy and productive lifestyle. And finally, a former Rutland Herald reporter who covered district court wrote, I heard him give the Father Frank speech. Where you go from here is up to you. But the core message being one of forgiveness, redemption, and hope to the spirit of his faith in the individual. In closing, Mac believed that as long as we are willing to engage in the struggle, that's what's significant. Thank you all so much for being here.
Stay right here. Stay right here. Okay. Thank you, Rita. Governor Scott was not able to attend today due to scheduling conflicts, but Attorney Crusones, who was the former Rutland County Clerk and worked with Judge McCaffrey in the courts, and as Rita said, is now Executive Director of the Vermont Bar Association, and also, as Rita pointed out, the force behind the Events Committee, will read the Governor's proclamation in honor of Judge McCaffrey and the rededication of the courthouse. Justice Reiber and Judge Crusones will also unveil the portrait that will hang in these halls of justice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. And being mindful of your patients and the temperature, the proclamation is on the back of your program. So I'll just summarize that throughout all of Vermont today. Governor Scott has proclaimed this as the Francis B. McCaffrey Courthouse Dedication Day. And we and this proclamation will hang next to a portrait that we will ask Rita, there's a bow for you to to set aside, to commemorate the man that will be forever associated with this beautiful building and such a beautiful tribute today. So I guess, Justice Schreiber, if you want to do the honor?
That's cool.
There we go.
Well, good call, Terry. This concludes our ceremony and the renaming of this building. Please be sure to sign the guest book before you leave. There are refreshments in the lobby. Terry's made one of her famous cakes. You won't want to miss that. And thank you all for coming and honoring Judge Francis B. McCaffrey.